It's the oldest standing building in Idaho, listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and the centerpiece of an 18-acre Idaho State Park. It was built on faith, vision, and cross-cultural respect. It's a sanctuary worthy of its monikers.
The Mission of the Sacred Heart, Cataldo's Mission, Old Mission. There's a bunch of names that this building goes by. It was constructed in 1850 and completed in 1853 by the Jesuit missionaries and the Coeur d'Alene tribe.
Decades before, Circling Raven, a tribal leader and visionary, foresaw the arrival of the Black Robes, or holy men, who would introduce the Coeur d'Alene to a new religion and a new way of life.
According to our stories, he had a vision of meeting these Black Robes with a cross. So we foretold that one day that they would come amongst us, and it happened.
And they told his people to be welcoming of these people when they came.
Tequel, Squeak, Klipa, Schlas, Waskasa, Schlas on Spotpot.
Father Peter Byrne is a Jesuit pastor at the Coeur d'Alene Indian Reservation.
We glorify you.
How did he ever even have that sense or image of Black Robes? They feel that French trappers and Iroquois trappers came down into Montana and spoke about Black Robes because they were already way up in French Canada. So they went searching for Black Robes. And they went to St. Louis and met Father Peter de Smet. And he came into Stevensville, Montana, and was welcomed by the Salish people of that area.
Father de Smet was a renowned peacemaker and mediator. He dispatched a small group of Jesuits to establish a mission among the Coeur d'Alene, first along the St. Joe River. But persistent flooding prompted them to relocate it onto a hill overlooking the Coeur d'Alene River. Years later, Father Antonio Rivalli designed a permanent church, and as many as 300 Coeur d'Alene built it alongside the Jesuit brothers. Their tools consisted of little more than a broadaxe, auger, and penknife.
There were no nails used in the original construction of this building. It was all mortise and tenon jointed together. They used a wattle and daub technique to create the walls. It's a adobe-like method where they would take river grass and braid it and weave it, and then they would take river mud and pack it back into the walls as well. So the walls are approximately a foot thick each. In the back sacristies, you can see some of the original fingerprints from the Coeur d'Alene tribe as they were packing the mud in the corners and as they were spreading it out on the walls. The Coeur d'Alene tribe and the Jesuit missionaries were very creative and very resourceful with their means. In order to fashion their candle holders and their chandeliers, they were taking their goods that they had and recycling them. Father Rivalli carved all the candle holders out of tin cans.
The church of Cataldo mimics the front part of the main Jesuit church in Rome, called the Gesù, which is Italian for Jesus. Even if we don't have any denominational care or just the way it was built and all that, I think that's a pretty amazing building. And then there's history there. There was an encounter, and there still is an encounter. And like any encounter, there's tension in the encounter, and there's forgiveness, and then there's hurt, and then there's love.
Drink from it.
The Jesuits had a sense of an invisible world, a sacramental world, that everything images the unseen presence of the Creator. And that resonated, I think, with the Native people.
With the bare hands of our people, this place in the wilderness was built and become a beacon not only to Native people, but also to the pioneers and trappers, soldiers that came through the area.
But as more miners, loggers, and military poured into the area, tensions between whites and Native Americans rose. The Coeur d'Alene War of 1858 erupted between an alliance of Native American tribes, primarily the Coeur d'Alene, and the U.S. Army, led by Colonel Edward Steptoe and later Colonel George Wright.
They fought all through the Spokane Plains, through the Palouse country, and soldiers were pushing them back. My tupia, my great-great-grandmother was Halia, and she was a young girl at that battle. But they rode back to here, to Cataldo, I guess as a place of safety. Actually, this place was where they signed a treaty of peace with the United States government.
With a treaty in place, Cataldo Mission would go on to serve several critical roles.
Captain John Mullen spent some time here when he was putting in the Mullen Road from Fort Benson to Walla Walla. Father Cataldo, he was the Archbishop of the Rocky Mountain West. He had his headquarters here for quite some time. He was actually the one that founded Gonzaga University. The mission landing was where the steamboats would come up from Lake Coeur d'Alene and travel the Coeur d'Alene River. It was as high up as they could navigate. There were rail lines that would meet the steamboats and take people back to Lake Coeur d'Alene, take ore and take logs down the river as well.
In the 1870s, President Ulysses S. Grant signed a series of executive orders redrawing Native American reservation boundaries. The Coeur d'Alene Reservation Order excluded the mission. So the Jesuits and the tribe moved to De Smet, Idaho. A cornerstone for a new Gothic-style church was laid in De Smet in 1881, but tragically it burned down in 1939. After Cataldo was abandoned, it fell into disrepair, prompting the Boise Diocese to take it over in the 1920s to restore it. The mission had more work done in the 1950s, but it declined again.
The last major restoration was done in 1974 in preparation for the bicentennial of the United States. The building was left uninhabited and unmaintained for some period of time, so a lot of vandalism did occur. People were starting fires in the middle of the floor in the main sanctuary here. All of the main floor has been reproduced. The flooring underneath the altar is still what is original in this building. If you look closely, you can see all the hand-hewn marks from the broad axe strokes as they were flattening those boards out.
The state of Idaho turned the property into a state park in 1975. The Boise Diocese deeded it back to the Coeur d'Alene in 2001. Today, it's managed in partnership with the tribe and the Idaho Department of Parks and Recreation. The park includes a museum housing a Sacred Encounters exhibit.
It was a happy treaty, if you will, with the state of Idaho to have the state parks take care of it, and they're doing a heck of a bang-up job. This place is ours, but it belongs to all of us, I think. Not only in the Coeur d'Alene tribe's heritage, but a lot of the people around here, too.
The relationship between the Coeur d'Alene and the Jesuits has endured the test of time, but as Father Burns sees it, it might be best described in one word.
Complicated. Complicated. Even though we came at the invitation of the people, which helps a lot. I mean, we didn't just kind of show up and said, hello, we're here. No, they wanted us here. And the Coeur d'Alene all became Catholic for the most part. You know, the Catholic experience in those days could be pretty strict. So a lot of them felt they couldn't still be native and be Catholic. I mean, so that's where the complication comes in.
The Lord be with you and with your spirit.
There's a lot of respect for us. I mean, I'd always heard this before, that we're not seen exactly as white people. One thing my uncle said, and he says, you know, I don't want to be Indian. I want them to be Indian so we can have a real encounter, a real relationship.
His uncle was Father Cornelius Byrne, who served as pastor for the Coeur d'Alene for decades.
He came here to De Smet in the early 30s. The native people gave him a name, He Who Is Great in the Heart, in Salish. And then he became the first white person and the first Jesuit, but first white person to be buried in the cemetery. And he was the first honorary member of the Coeur d'Alene tribe, non-native. He encouraged the tribe to make a pilgrimage back to the church of Cataldo to capture again the coming of the Jesuits and the meeting with the Coeur d'Alene people, and together how they built that church.
The pilgrimage coincides with the Feast of Assumption on August 15th, a special day in the Christian faith. It grew so popular in North Idaho that it became problematic to the Coeur d'Alene people.
If you get a certain proportion of non-native people coming to any event, the native people just, they withdraw. It became such a tourist thing. Again, the natives just kind of withdrew. It's just, we've lost that too.
The Feast of Assumption pilgrimage may be smaller today, but it remains important for those who attend.
Holy God, our Creator, we pray.
One of the Jesuits has worked with Native people for 50 years. Kind of gets this feeling from them. We're rising. We're finding our voice. We're not just to be pitied. No, there's a future. The body and the blood of Christ.
I told my grandson, I brought him in here for the first time today. His name's Takija. And we walked in here and I told him, I said, your great-great-grandparents built this. I said, you know, and he said, they did. He said, yeah. I said, they did. They did a good job. He said, yeah, they did. He said, this is awesome. You know, he's going to remember this and he's going to keep coming. And when he comes in, he's going to have a profound sense of who he is. If you sit up here in the night, you can hear the voices of our people, or you can hear the animals talking, or you can hear the whispers through the trees. We fought hard to get the land back into the ownership of the tribe. Our ancestors are buried here. If there was ever a holy site in Coeur d'Alene country, this is one of the places that would be a sacred site.